The sun of Zerath Prime bathed the alien capital in soft golden light, reflecting off the crystalline towers that stretched into the sky like shimmering spears. The city was alive with movement and hums of energy, the air thick with the presence of beings whose minds could bend reality. This was the home of the Luxari Empire, a civilization that prized intellect above all else, where emotions were considered inefficient and logic ruled every decision. In the grand palace at the center of the city, preparations were underway for an event that would shock the empire. Queen Seralith, the ruler of the Luxari, floated gracefully through the grand hall, her eyes scanning the endless lines of attendants, nobles, and diplomats. She was a vision of authority and beauty, her form shimmering with the faint glow of her psionic energy. Every movement she made was precise, controlled, and deliberate, as though her body were an extension of her mind. The Luxari had ruled countless worlds, their intellect unmatched, their strategies flawless. And yet today she was marrying a human. Elia's hunter had been sent as an ambassador from Earth, a representative of a species that the Luxari often dismissed as primitive. Humans were emotional, unpredictable, and stubborn, traits that the Luxari found inefficient. But Seralith had seen something different in him, something curious and unexplainable. Perhaps it was his unwavering confidence, or perhaps it was the way his mind seemed to work in ways that defied the rigid structure of Luxari thought. Whatever it was, she had chosen him, and today the entire empire would witness her decision. Elias stood at the entrance to the grand hall, his posture straight and calm. He wore ceremonial attire given to him by the Luxari, a robe woven with threads that shimmered faintly with energy. Despite the unfamiliar surroundings, he did not falter. Humans were known for their adaptability, and Elias was no exception. He had studied the Luxari, learned their customs, and observed their strategies. And yet he carried himself with the ease of someone who knew that no matter how alien the world, he could find a way to navigate it. As the ceremony began, the Luxari nobles whispered among themselves. "Why would the queen marry a human?" one asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "He cannot match her mind. He cannot match her power. He is ordinary." The ceremony itself was a blend of Luxari tradition and human customs, a compromise that left some nobles uncomfortable. Seralith and Elias exchanged vows in a language that was foreign to both human and Luxari onlookers, words imbued with meaning that transcended spoken form. When the ceremony concluded, the hall erupted in applause, though many clapped reluctantly, still unable to reconcile the image of their queen standing beside a human. As the celebrations continued, Seralith observed Elias quietly. He moved among the guests with a calm confidence, engaging in conversation with diplomats and nobles alike. He did not rely on the psionic abilities that the Luxari valued so highly. Instead, he relied on something simpler, yet no less powerful: observation, reasoning, and a remarkable ability to understand others. During a discussion about trade routes with a visiting ambassador from a neighboring system, Elias offered suggestions that seemed almost trivial at first, yet they revealed insights that even the most experienced Luxari strategists had overlooked. Seralith watched as her human husband navigated the complex politics of the empire with a clarity and intuition that defied expectation. By the evening, the grand hall had transformed into a space of music and light. Elias moved through the crowd with ease, smiling and laughing in ways that were natural yet disarming to the Luxari. Seralith found herself studying him more closely than ever before, trying to understand how someone so seemingly ordinary could command such quiet influence. Later, in a private chamber, Seralith approached Elias, her mind still trying to grasp the paradox he presented. "You do not rely on psionic power," she said, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "Yet you move through this court with more ease than any Luxari noble I have seen." Sometimes thinking differently is stronger than thinking alike. The days following the wedding were filled with both celebration and subtle tension. The Luxari watched closely as Elias adapted to his new role, his human perspective offering fresh insights into matters of strategy, governance, and diplomacy. Where the Luxari relied on psychic calculations and rigid logic, Elias considered possibilities that no one else had imagined, often suggesting approaches that seemed reckless at first, yet proved remarkably effective. One evening, as the twin moons of Zerath Prime cast silver light over the palace gardens, Seralith found herself walking alongside Elias. "Do you ever fear that your ways will fail here?" she asked, her tone more thoughtful than usual. Elias shook his head. I do not fear failure, he said. I expect it sometimes, but failure teaches you lessons that no calculation can provide, and humans we adapt, that is our strength. These were not traits the Luxari valued highly, yet she could not deny their power. In Elias, she saw a potential that went beyond psychic ability, beyond intellect. He represented something new, something unpredictable, something that could change the way her empire saw strength. Their conversation was interrupted by a message from the palace council. A distant system had reported unusual activity, an energy signature that did not match any known Luxari technology. The council feared it might be the beginnings of an invasion, though they were uncertain. Sarilith read the reports quickly, her mind calculating possibilities even as she observed Elia's reaction. Instead of fear, he showed curiosity. What do you know about it? He asked. The queen explained the data, the calculations, the possibilities. Elias listened, then asked questions no one else had considered. Have you thought about how they might exploit the predictability of your defenses? He asked. Sometimes, the simplest approach can turn an advantage into a vulnerability. He was seeing angles that even her council had missed. A human, standing in a palace filled with centuries of calculated thought, was suggesting strategies that could avert disaster. Over the next few days, as reports of strange activity increased, Elias began offering his guidance more openly. The Luxari Council was skeptical at first, their traditions and pride making them resistant to a human's suggestions. Yet when minor test maneuvers were attempted according to his advice, they succeeded in ways that even the most experienced Luxari had failed. Sarilith watched closely, her admiration for her husband growing. The human mind was not limited by the same rules as hers. It was creative, unpredictable, and capable of seeing solutions in chaos. He had not only survived the court but was beginning to influence it, reshaping strategies that had been accepted for centuries. In a quiet moment, Sarilith reflected on the path that had led her here. She had chosen a human not out of whim, but because she sensed potential where others saw weakness. Elias had proven that potential was real, that humans could be more than what the Luxari believed. And yet she realized this was only the beginning. Beyond the palace, the unknown force continued its approach, silent but persistent. The Luxari were preparing defenses in the ways they had always known, relying on their power and strategy. Elias, however, was already thinking differently, considering possibilities the Luxari could not imagine. As the twin moons rose high over Zerath Prime, Sarilith and Elias stood together on the balcony, overlooking the city. The Empire thrummed below them, confident in its strength yet unaware of the true challenge approaching. The queen knew in that moment that she had married not just a human, but a mind capable of changing the course of history. And the human beside her smiled, calm and resolute, ready to prove that what the Luxari considered weakness could, in fact, be humanity's greatest power. The city shimmered beneath the stars, the palace lights reflecting the tension and anticipation that hung in the air. The first battle had not yet begun, but the queen could already sense the ripple of change that Elias would bring. And as the human's presence settled into the empire, one truth became clear. Power was not only about what could be controlled or calculated. Sometimes it was about daring to think differently, to challenge expectations, and to act when others hesitated. Elias turned to Sarilith one last time before retiring for the evening. The Luxari may not understand us, he said quietly, but they will, eventually. Humans, we have a way of surprising the universe. And in that trust, she found a sense of anticipation and excitement, a feeling that the empire itself was about to witness the true power of humanity. The days after the wedding passed in a blur of ceremonial duties and diplomatic engagements. Despite the splendor of the Luxari palace and the constant attention of the court, Elias remained calm, observing everything with a careful human eye. The Luxari were predictable in many ways, their strategies, their reactions, their reliance on psychic precision, but they had never faced someone who could see beyond the obvious. Elias was learning, adapting, and quietly testing the limits of the Empire's rigid structures. One morning, the palace communication hub buzzed with a high-priority alert. Reports from the edge of Luxari space had detected an unusual phenomenon. A fleet of machines moving through the void, their designs unlike any Luxari technology. They were fast, adaptive, and organized in a way that suggested intelligence, but not the kind the Luxari knew. The council immediately convened, their glowing forms flickering with agitation as calculations and predictions streamed through the room. Sarilith entered the council chamber, Elias at her side, and the room fell silent. The Luxari were unsure what to make of the human. Some still doubted him, seeing him as a novelty or a curiosity. Yet Sarilith trusted him, and she was willing to test his insights. "These reports are troubling," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We need solutions, not hesitation." Each option was precise, calculated, and designed to minimize loss. Yet Elias listened quietly, absorbing every detail. He noticed patterns, gaps, and inconsistencies that the Luxari overlooked. Finally, he spoke. "Your plans rely on predictability," he said, his voice steady. "But this enemy is not predictable in the way you are accustomed to. They will adapt, and if you assume they will act as you expect, you will be caught off guard. Sometimes, the simplest approach can bypass even the most advanced systems." Instead of relying solely on psychic control or rigid formations, he proposed flexible fleet movements, unconventional attack patterns, and deceptive maneuvers designed to confuse the AI fleet. He also suggested that small teams infiltrate enemy signals networks, disrupting communication and forcing the machines to make decisions without complete information. The council murmured in disbelief. Many of them considered such tactics reckless, beneath the dignity of the Luxari, yet Sarilith nodded. "We will test it," she said. "Prepare the fleet according to his recommendations, but maintain standard defenses as a precaution." He showed them how minor changes in timing, angle, and formation could produce dramatic effects against an adaptive enemy. The engineers were skeptical, but as they ran simulations, they began to see that his ideas had merit. The AI fleet, designed to anticipate standard Luxari tactics, failed to account for unpredictability. Even minor deviations caused the machines to miscalculate, giving the Luxari a small but significant advantage. During one simulation, a Luxari admiral questioned Elias directly. "Your methods are unorthodox," he said. "They may succeed once, but can they be repeated reliably? Humans survive by adapting, not by following a single formula. Sometimes the mind matters more than the power behind it." Elias was teaching them a new kind of strategy, one based on intuition, creativity, and anticipation rather than calculation alone. As the AI fleet moved closer to Luxari space, reports of its activity increased. Entire supply stations had vanished without warning, and communication hubs along the border were scrambled by advanced algorithms. Panic was subtle but present among some of the younger council members who had never encountered a threat that could outthink them. Elias remained calm. "Panic does nothing," he told Sarilith privately. "We can solve this if we stay flexible and think in ways they won't expect. The machines are strong, yes, but they are not human. They cannot imagine what we will do next unless we show them." As night fell over Zerath Prime, the palace buzzed with preparation. Fleet commanders took positions, energy shields were raised, and Luxari warships moved into formation. Yet Elias continued to make subtle adjustments, observing sensor readings and relaying suggestions to pilots and engineers. His ideas were unconventional, but they were proving effective, and even the skeptics began to see the logic behind them. In the observation deck, Sarilith watched the stars for signs of the approaching fleet. She felt a strange tension, anticipation mixed with respect. "Do you believe we can stop them?" she asked Elias. He shrugged, a small human gesture. "I believe we can do more than stop them," he said. "We can make them retreat, but we have to act before they adapt to our moves. Timing and unpredictability are everything." Standard protocols would have destroyed them with overwhelming force, but Elias instructed the fleet to hold back, to bait the probes and then counter with unexpected maneuvers. The result was astonishing. The AI probes, designed to calculate and adapt to expected strategies, were thrown into confusion. Ships moved in patterns no algorithm could anticipate, and the Luxari found themselves in a position of advantage. The council was stunned, some openly whispering their astonishment. Sarilith stood by Elias as the battle unfolded. "You see what I mean?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes the greatest strength is being unpredictable, thinking differently. That is what humans do best." The skirmish ended with the AI probes retreating, damaged but not destroyed. The Luxari fleet had gained a minor victory, but more importantly, they had witnessed a strategy that had confounded a machine intelligence far superior in calculation to any Luxari mind. For the first time in history, Human ingenuity had outmatched alien technology in the eyes of an entire empire. Back at the palace, celebrations were muted. The council was relieved, but many were uneasy. How could a human, so limited in power by Luxari standards, achieve what their entire military doctrine had struggled to do? Sarilith did not doubt Elias. She had seen the results, and she knew that his methods worked. Yet she also knew this was only the beginning. In the quiet of the palace gardens, Elias and Sarilith walked together under the light of the twin moons. "They may not understand us yet," Elias said softly, "but they will. And when they do, the Empire will be stronger than it has ever been." Humans were unpredictable, yes, but they were also courageous, resilient, and capable of seeing solutions where others saw only problems. In Elias, she had not only found a partner but a mind that could challenge centuries of tradition and change the fate of her empire. The coming days would bring greater challenges. The AI fleet was not finished. This was merely a test, a glimpse of the danger to come. Yet with Elia's guidance, the Luxari were beginning to see that true power was not only in psychic ability or calculated strategy. It was also in creativity, in adaptability, and in the courage to act when others hesitated. As they returned to the palace, Sarilith felt a sense of anticipation she had not felt in centuries. A new era was dawning, one in which the strengths of humanity would be tested, and in which the unexpected abilities of a single human could determine the fate of an entire empire. And Elias, walking beside her with quiet confidence, was ready to face it all. The AI fleet had retreated, but its presence lingered like a shadow over the Luxari Empire. Sensors continued to pick up small, fast-moving probes, and scattered attacks on remote outposts suggested the enemy was testing weaknesses. The Council insisted on following standard defensive protocols, reinforcing fleets and preparing barriers, yet Sarilith trusted Elias' instincts. She had seen his strategies work where centuries of Luxari planning had failed, and she knew the human mind held advantages that even her empire could not yet grasp. Elias spent hours studying the patterns of the AI fleet, analyzing every movement, every communication disruption. Unlike the Luxari, who relied on their psychic calculations and known tactics, he thought differently. He looked for the gaps, the assumptions, the things the AI could not predict. Where the Luxari saw chaos, Elias saw opportunity. During a council session, a young admiral expressed doubt. "Human," he said, voice sharp. "These machines are beyond calculation. They anticipate everything. How can your improvisation succeed where our psychic power fails? They cannot guess what you will do if it makes no sense to them. That is where we strike." She had always respected intelligence, but Elias' way of thinking was something new, something fluid, something that the rigid logic of the Luxari could not anticipate. Preparations began for a decisive confrontation. The AI fleet had concentrated near the outer rim of Luxari space, and reports indicated they were forming an advance squadron to strike a populated system. Traditional Luxari tactics would have met them head-on in formation, using psychic energy to control fleet maneuvers with precision. Elias, however, proposed a different approach, a combination of misdirection, flexible attacks, and rapid improvisation. He met with fleet commanders in a simulation room, pointing to the holographic projections of enemy formations. "They expect linear attacks," he explained. "They assume that if we follow standard protocols, we will act predictably. But if we change formations mid-maneuver, if we let small teams act independently with authority to improvise, they will be confused. Their calculations will fail. Give humans and Luxari alike the freedom to act when opportunity arises. Trust instincts. Predictability is their weakness. Flexibility is ours." Instead, Elias directed a small Luxari human hybrid strike team to infiltrate the enemy's path and employ unconventional tactics. Using simple decoy drones, the team diverted the AI vessels, creating openings for precise attacks. The Luxari pilots, initially hesitant to act without full coordination, followed Elias' guidance. The result was stunning. The AI vessels, designed to anticipate and counter coordinated maneuvers, found themselves in disarray. Their systems conflicted, unable to reconcile the unexpected actions, and they were forced to retreat. Back at the command center, Sarilith watched as the operation unfolded. Her psionic senses traced the flow of energy, and she felt the AI's calculations unravel in real time. "Incredible," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Elias had done what she had never seen done before. He had turned human unpredictability into a strategic weapon. Over the next few days, Elia's methods were applied to several skirmishes along the Empire's borders. Each time, the results were the same. The AI fleet was clever and adaptable, but it could not handle the chaotic and innovative tactics the humans introduced. While the Luxari still relied on their psychic abilities, they began to see the value of improvisation, lateral thinking, and the human capacity to act against expectations. The council, once skeptical, grew increasingly reliant on Elia's guidance. One evening, a senior Luxari strategist approached him privately. "Human," he said, "your methods are unsettling. They work, yes, but they defy everything we have taught. How can a species so limited in raw power achieve what centuries of our training could not?" Power is not only strength or psychic ability. Sometimes it's seeing differently, acting where others hesitate, trusting your own mind when the world expects obedience. Humans have learned to survive in chaos. That is our advantage. She had married a human not for physical or psychic prowess, but for the mind, for the spark of creativity and courage that defied expectation. And now, that mind was proving its worth in ways that even she, with her centuries of experience, had not anticipated. The AI fleet, frustrated by repeated failures, escalated its tactics. Large formations began probing deeper into Luxari space, testing defenses and attempting to outmaneuver the newly adaptive fleet strategies. The Luxari prepared for a full-scale engagement, yet Elias remained calm. He observed patterns the AI had failed to conceal, noted timing and energy signatures, and formulated strategies that leveraged both human ingenuity and Luxari power. When the battle began, it was chaotic, yet calculated in its unpredictability. Elias directed small units to act independently, creating false openings and traps. Luxari warships moved in unexpected sequences, and the AI fleet struggled to process the disruptions. Every time they adapted, Elias had already predicted the counter, exploiting their rigidity in ways no traditional tactic could achieve. Sarilith followed the action from her observation post, her psionic senses amplifying the battle across space. She saw the AI's precision crumble under the pressure of human unpredictability combined with Luxari coordination. The fleet that had once been unstoppable was now faltering, unable to anticipate the innovations introduced by a single human mind. One critical moment came when the AI attempted a concentrated strike on a vulnerable sector. Elias identified the pattern almost instantly. "Redirect the units along Vector 9-3, he instructed. "Simulate a retreat, then ambush along Vector 11-7. Trust your instincts, not calculations." The council was stunned into silence. Never before had the Empire witnessed a strategy that combined improvisation, lateral thinking, and courage to such effect. Even the most experienced generals could not deny the results. Humans, it seemed, had a kind of power that the Luxari had never fully understood, a power that relied on creativity, adaptability, and a refusal to be predictable. After the battle, the Luxari celebrated cautiously. The immediate threat had been repelled, but everyone understood that the AI fleet would return, stronger and smarter. Yet for the first time, they felt a sense of hope rooted not in brute strength or psychic dominance, but in ingenuity and human intuition. Sarilith walked alongside Elias in the aftermath, the weight of the day pressing lightly on her shoulders. "You have done what no Luxari could," she said quietly, "and yet you act as if it were simple. The difficult part is trusting your instincts, being willing to act when others hesitate, and adapting when the world doesn't follow the rules you expect." Now she realized she had glimpsed just a fraction of the true power he held, not in raw psychic strength, not in calculation, but in thought itself. The following days were filled with preparations for the next engagement. The AI fleet had not been destroyed. It had learned, adapted, and would return. Elias worked tirelessly, analyzing patterns, devising strategies, and instructing Luxari forces on the principles of unpredictability and adaptation. The Empire was changing, even if only subtly, as the Luxari began to see that power was not only in mental strength, but in creativity, courage, and the human ability to see beyond the obvious. In quiet moments, Sarilith reflected on the paradox of her husband. He seemed ordinary, even fragile by Luxari standards, yet he possessed a form of strength that transcended the traditional measures of power. In his mind, she saw the potential not just to save the Empire, but to transform it entirely. Humans, she realized, were capable of greatness not despite their limitations, but because of them. Elias, ever calm, continued to prepare. He knew the AI fleet would return in force, and when it did, the battle would be unlike anything the Luxari had faced. Yet he was ready. Humans had survived countless challenges, adapting and improvising where others had failed. And now, in the vacuum of space, with the Luxari Empire at his side, he was prepared to show that ingenuity, courage, and unpredictability could triumph over even the most advanced machines. The twin moons of Zerath Prime rose once again, casting silver light over the palace and the city beyond. Seralith and Elias stood together, watching the horizon, aware that the true test was still to come. And as the stars shimmered above, one truth became clear. Humanity's greatest power was not in what could be seen or measured, but in the mind that dared to think differently. The Empire held its breath, the first hints of a new era stirring in the hearts of the Luxari. And Elias, standing calmly beside the Queen, was ready to prove that humans were capable of feats no one, not even the most powerful alien rulers, could fully fathom. The AI fleet had retreated once more, but their actions had become bolder, more aggressive, and far more dangerous. Intelligence reports indicated that the fleet had discovered a hidden weakness in the Luxari homeworld's outer defenses. The Council was in turmoil, frantic with calculations and contingency plans, yet none of their strategies fully accounted for the adaptive nature of the AI. They had learned, evolved, and now posed a threat that could not be neutralized by conventional methods alone. Seralith summoned Elias to the council chamber. The human entered calmly, eyes sharp and observant, taking in the tension that hung thick in the air. Luxari generals and strategists spoke rapidly, presenting calculations, probabilities, and predictions. But Elias listened quietly, his mind working differently from anyone else in the room. "Their approach is not random," Elias said finally. "They are probing for patterns, testing reactions. They will exploit anything they can predict. But they cannot anticipate creativity, improvisation, or risk that seems illogical." Elia's approach, however, relied on intuition, flexibility, and unpredictability, qualities the Luxari rarely valued in themselves, let alone others. Seralith placed a hand on his arm. "We must defend our world. You believe we can do this?" she asked. Elias nodded. "We can, but we must act before they reach the outer colonies. The key is to lure them into a position where their strengths become weaknesses. They rely on efficiency, on calculation. We will use that against them." Decoy ships would simulate retreat patterns, drawing the AI fleet into ambushes. Sensors were recalibrated to detect patterns in the AI movements that even the Luxari had missed. The night before the battle, Seralith and Elias walked along the palace balcony, overlooking the glittering city below. "You make it sound simple," Seralith said, a faint smile on her lips. "And yet the entire council doubts us. They left obvious weaknesses, baiting the AI fleet into attacking along predetermined paths. Small strike teams were embedded within larger formations, ready to act on their own judgment when opportunity arose. It was a bold plan, one that relied on both trust and improvisation, and the stakes could not have been higher. The AI fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their engines humming with quiet menace. Sensors lit up with incoming signals, and the council braced for attack. But Elias remained calm. He had anticipated this moment. "Follow Vector 7-4, he instructed the commanders. "Simulate retreat. Draw them forward, then strike at their flank." Timing is everything. Energy beams streaked across space, explosions lit the void, and the hum of engines filled the air. Yet amid the destruction, Elia's plan began to take effect. The AI, designed to predict and counter conventional strategies, found itself reacting to unexpected maneuvers. Its efficiency became its weakness. Units collided, algorithms conflicted, and communication networks became disrupted. Seralith monitored the battle from the observation deck, her psionic senses amplifying the chaos. She could feel the AI's calculations faltering, could sense the ripple of confusion spreading through their ranks. Her admiration for Elias grew with every passing moment. He was not merely a strategist. He was a mind that could bend reality with thought alone, using creativity and intuition as weapons. At a critical moment, the AI attempted a concentrated strike on a vulnerable planetary sector. Elias identified the pattern instantly. "Strike teams, intercept along vectors 9 and 12, he ordered. "Use decoys to mislead them, then hit their command nodes simultaneously. Trust your instincts. Improvise if necessary." Ships collided, formations broke, and the efficiency that had once made them formidable turned into chaos. Sarilith watched in awe as the battle unfolded. Elias moved through the command center, issuing instructions calmly and clearly, adjusting strategies on the fly. His human mind anticipated consequences, exploited gaps, and converted chaos into opportunity. The Luxari, who had relied on centuries of calculated strategy, were witnessing a new form of power, a form that came not from psychic dominance, but from ingenuity, adaptability, and courage. Hours passed in relentless combat. The AI fleet struggled to regain cohesion, but every attempt was countered by Elia's improvisation. Decoy ships, surprise flanking maneuvers, and unpredictable tactics left the enemy off balance. The Luxari pilots, once hesitant to deviate from protocol, began to trust their instincts, responding in ways that even Elias had not explicitly planned. Human creativity had become a force multiplier for the Empire. By the end of the engagement, the AI fleet had been decisively repelled. Several key vessels were destroyed, their command systems disabled, and the remaining forces withdrew into uncharted space. The Luxari homeworld remained safe, and the Empire had survived a threat that could have been catastrophic. The Council was stunned into silence. They had relied on psychic calculation and centuries of military theory, yet it was a human insight that had turned the tide. Even the most skeptical generals could not deny the results. Elias had proven that power was not only in strength or psychic ability, but in creativity, intuition, and the ability to act where others hesitated. In the aftermath, Sarilith approached Elias in the quiet of the command chamber. "You have done what we could not once, but repeatedly," she said. "And yet you act as if it were nothing." She had married a human not because he was physically powerful, nor because he possessed psychic abilities, but because he could see beyond the obvious, think beyond limitations, and inspire others to do the same. Humanity, she realized, was not weak. It was formidable in ways the Luxari had never understood. Over the next few days, the Luxari implemented Elia's strategies on a wider scale. Training programs began to emphasize adaptability, improvisation, and human-inspired decision-making. While not all Luxari were comfortable with the change, the results spoke for themselves. The Empire had survived a threat that could have overwhelmed even their most advanced forces, and it was now stronger, more resilient, and more innovative than ever before. In private, Sarilith reflected on the events. Elias had not only saved the Empire, but had also challenged centuries of tradition and reshaped the way her people understood strength. Humans, she realized, held a power that was subtle but profound, a power that relied not on dominance, but on creativity, courage, and the willingness to act when others hesitated. Elias, calm and composed as ever, continued to prepare for the inevitable return of the AI fleet. He studied their movements, adjusted strategies, and taught the Luxari to think beyond formulas and calculations. He had shown them that unpredictability could be a weapon, that ingenuity could outmatch raw power, and that humanity's greatest strength lay in the mind and heart, not in physical or psychic dominance. As the twin moons rose over Zerath Prime, Sarilith and Elias stood together on the palace balcony, watching the stars for signs of the returning threat. The Empire had survived, yes, but the war was far from over. The AI fleet would return, stronger and smarter. Yet for the first time, the Luxari faced the future not with fear, but with confidence, guided by the human who had shown them a new path. And Elias, standing calmly beside the Queen, knew that humanity's ingenuity, courage, and willingness to act beyond expectation would be the deciding factor in the battles to come. The Empire had witnessed the first glimpse of the true power of a human mind, and it was a force that no machine, no matter how intelligent, could fully anticipate. The stars stretched endlessly above, silent witnesses to the beginning of a new era. Sarilith felt a sense of awe and anticipation unlike anything she had known. She had married a human, a being she once considered fragile and ordinary, and he had revealed a power that transcended her understanding. The Empire had survived, and the human beside her had proven that unpredictability, creativity, and courage were as formidable as any psychic ability. The AI threat had been delayed, not destroyed. The next encounter would test the limits of human ingenuity and Luxari adaptability alike. But for now, the Empire could breathe, confident in the knowledge that the human queen had chosen was more than capable of meeting any challenge. And Elias, ever calm and thoughtful, gazed at the horizon with quiet determination. The universe had yet to see the full extent of humanity's power, and when it did, even the most advanced civilizations would understand that strength could come not from domination or calculation, but from the mind that dares to think differently. The AI fleet had retreated, but their absence was only temporary. Sensors indicated they were regrouping, adapting, and preparing for a final, massive strike. Every Luxari command post buzzed with activity, alarms ringing as intelligence reports predicted widespread devastation if the fleet reached the homeworld. The Council debated endlessly, proposing massive psychic barriers, overwhelming fleet deployments, and intricate calculations. Yet Sarilith knew that their traditional methods would not be enough. She turned to Elias, her human husband, whose calm eyes held a certainty that the Luxari could not understand. "They will strike soon," Sarilith said quietly, standing beside him on the observation balcony. "The Council insists on conventional defenses, but I trust your instincts." "Conventional defenses will slow them, yes, but they will not stop them. We need to use unpredictability, improvisation, and bold action. That is our advantage." He analyzed the AI's previous behavior, identifying patterns they had failed to conceal. Then he created strategies that combined Luxari strength with human unpredictability, forming layers of deception, traps, and contingencies. He assembled specialized strike teams composed of humans and Luxari, training them to think independently, act on instinct, and exploit gaps in the AI fleet. Decoy formations were established, but they were more than distractions. They were instruments to guide the AI into overextending, exposing weaknesses no one else could anticipate. The night before the decisive engagement, Sarilith walked with Elias through the palace gardens. "They underestimate humans," she said softly. "Even after all we've done, they still doubt your abilities." Luxari commanders braced for battle, their psychic energy humming, calculations streaming faster than the human eye could perceive. But Elias remained composed, observing every movement, noting every minor detail. "Engage the decoys," he instructed, his voice calm but firm. "Let them think they have the advantage, then strike where they are weakest. Trust your instincts, not only your orders." The AI, built to calculate and adapt, struggled to reconcile the unpredictability of the human's actions. Sarilith watched as the battle unfolded, her psionic senses amplifying the chaos. The AI fleet's precision began to crumble under the pressure of human ingenuity and improvisation. Units collided, formations broke apart, and coordination failed. Where the machines were supposed to adapt flawlessly, they faltered at every turn. Elias moved through the command center with quiet determination. He adjusted strategies on the fly, redirecting ships, anticipating AI reactions, and giving commanders freedom to act independently. His mind worked in ways no Luxari mind could replicate, simultaneously calculating probabilities, predicting behavior, and exploiting opportunities. At a critical moment, the AI concentrated its forces on the outer planetary defenses. Elias identified a hidden vulnerability in their formation and acted decisively. "Strike teams converge on vectors 12 and 15, he ordered. "Use every unconventional tactic available. Distract, confuse, and isolate their command units. The rest will follow." For the first time, the Luxari witnessed machines that could calculate faster than any mind being utterly defeated by creativity and intuition. Sarilith felt a surge of pride and awe. Elias had revealed a form of power that transcended psychic ability, strength, or calculation. It was the power of thought, adaptability, and courage, the kind that had allowed humans to survive countless challenges across history. The human beside her had shown that even the most advanced machines could not contend with a mind willing to think differently. Hours passed in relentless combat. The AI fleet, once menacing and unstoppable, now retreated in disarray. Every attempt to regroup was anticipated by Elias, every strategy countered with ingenuity. Luxari ships followed his guidance, adapting to unforeseen circumstances, and every strike team acted with autonomy, exploiting the AI's weaknesses. Finally, the decisive moment arrived. The AI's flagship, a massive vessel controlling the fleet, attempted a desperate final attack. Elias analyzed the situation, then made a bold choice. "We end this now," he said. "All units converge on the flagship from multiple vectors, use decoys to split their focus, strike simultaneously on command nodes, trust yourselves." What had seemed unstoppable was now defeated, a testament to ingenuity over brute force. The remaining vessels fled, their cohesion destroyed, leaving the Luxari Empire victorious. The command center erupted in celebration. The council, once skeptical of Elia's methods, now bowed in acknowledgement of his brilliance. Even the most conservative generals could not deny that human creativity had saved the empire. Sarilith approached Elias as the commotion died down. "You have done what no Luxari could," she said, her voice steady with emotion. "You have saved our world and shown that humans are capable of far more than we imagined. We survive because we adapt. We thrive because we think differently. That is all you've seen today." Humanity, she understood, held a power that no one could measure, a power that transcended the traditional definitions of strength. In the following days, the Luxari began restructuring their approach to defense and governance. Training programs incorporated human-inspired strategies, emphasizing improvisation, adaptability, and independent thinking. The empire was stronger, not only because it had survived, but because it had learned a new form of strength, the human way. Elias continued to guide and teach, blending his insight with Luxari technology and strategy. The AI threat, once terrifying, had been neutralized, and the empire had emerged wiser and more resilient. For Sarilith, the greatest revelation was not in victory, but in understanding the depth of her husband's abilities. He had revealed that true power was not measured by psychic strength or military might, but by the courage to think differently and the creativity to act when others could not. One evening, as the twin moons rose over Zerath Prime, Sarilith and Elias stood together on the palace balcony, watching the stars. The Empire was safe, the AI defeated, and the lessons of humanity had been etched into the hearts of even the most skeptical Luxari. "You have changed everything," Sarilith said softly. "The Empire, the Council, even me. And yet you remain calm, as if it were nothing." She had married a human without fully knowing the depths of his mind, and he had proven that humanity's true power lay in thought, courage, and adaptability. The Empire had witnessed the strength of a species it had underestimated for centuries, and in doing so, it had gained a new perspective on what it meant to be truly powerful. As the stars shimmered above, Sarilith realized that this was not the end, but the beginning of a new era. Humans and Luxari, working together, could face any challenge, no matter how formidable. The Empire had learned that strength came in many forms, and that the most unexpected could sometimes be the most powerful of all. Elias, standing beside the Queen, gazed at the horizon with quiet determination. The AI fleet might return one day, stronger and smarter, but the human mind, flexible and unpredictable, would always find a way. Humanity had revealed its true power, not through brute force or psychic ability, but through courage, creativity, and the refusal to be constrained by expectation. The Luxari Empire had survived, and a new understanding had been forged. And at the heart of it all stood a human, calm, thoughtful, and extraordinary in ways no one had anticipated. The universe had yet to see the full extent of what humans could achieve, but it had already witnessed enough to know that when humanity acted, the impossible became possible. The twin moons of Zerath Prime reflected off the crystalline towers, casting silver light across the city. Sarilith placed a hand on Elia's arm, feeling the quiet strength in him. "The Empire owes you more than it can say," she said. He shook his head with a small smile. "The Empire owes itself, not me. It owes itself the chance to think differently, to act boldly, and to survive against the impossible. Today, it learned that lesson. The AI threat was gone, for now, but humanity's rise had been revealed, and nothing in the universe would ever underestimate them again.